Today I'm going to show you a method I developed for propagating SPS, small polyp stony corals. As far as I know, it's the most efficient method that I've ever seen, and I'm hoping it's widely adopted. It's actually quite easy. I'm on my sailboat actually, and so it's going to be a little bit windy and the conditions may not be ideal. A little bit of rocking. Also, I cannot edit this video, so the quality of the video may be a little bit poor, and I do apologize for that in advance. Alright, so first we have this, basically I've got, these are some Pocillopora damicornus, P. damicornus, that I've already cut up basically. Simply propagation by fragmentation, and I just use clippers such as these. And most of these are already cut up. Let me see if I can find one. This one we can divide a little bit farther here. They're actually quite hardy. And you can touch the corals. See how there's just two of them there. What you try to do is you want to leave a substrate, a base on it, because this is actually going to be embedded. This part's going to be embedded here. Then this is the part that's going to grow out. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to pour individual cubes, and the individual cubes will each have a coral actually embedded in it. Not on the surface, not crazy glued or epoxied to the surface, but actually embedded in it, which makes it tremendously strong. So as you can imagine, the key is this mix. This is a mix that I developed, and it looks like cement, but it's actually not just really cement. It's a proprietary mix that is not caustic to the coral. So basically the corals can be embedded in this mix, and it's not quite as alkaline as regular concrete or cement is, and so it doesn't kill the coral. And you'll see after this sets up, you'll see that all the coral tissue is intact all the way down to the level where it's embedded. Now this is simply egg crate. These are 14 millimeter across squares, and then it's got a piece of plexiglass on the back side, and then you notice it's got 4 rubber bands, and the rubber bands have to line up with the plexiglass, the lateral, the polystyrene laterals, because you don't want to block a cube like this. You want to make sure it's like that. Anyway. Alright, so I'm going to show you the whole process. It's a really easy process. The key basically though is the substrate. You can't just use any old substrate. You've got to make sure you use a non-toxic substrate. So here I've got the mix, and I'm going to, this is just regular water, and you don't want to put too much in, because you don't want it to get too soupy. That's really important, because it's easy to add more, but you can't unadd it to it. Now these all came from the same colony, which is important because these are clonal corals. These are genetically identical corals. And so, you know, theoretically they should behave very similar to each other. So if you're doing any kind of research, especially medical research, the fact that they're clonal corals should remove some variability that would be due to genetics. Okay? And the more variables, of course, that you can remove, the more you can limit it down to the ones that actually are what you're trying to research. So these will all be clonals. You can mix corals, obviously, but these just happen to be all from one mother colony. And I did collect them off of a mother colony that's still intact. So the mother colony will regrow the parts that I broke off really quite easily. Okay, I don't know if you can see this mix. We're getting a good consistency here. I want to keep it pretty thick. And I'm only going to pour half of it at a time, because this mix alright, that's actually looking pretty good. Alright. Probably should pour it where you can see it out of the camera, right? Kind of hard to do in a rocking boat, but right. Now this particular tray holds, I think, around 120 cubes. I'm going to do a checkerboard pattern on this one to give them some room for grow out. You could do every one if you wanted to, but I'm going to skip it. You know, and you don't want the frags to be too big or too small. Got one right here. I leave the corners open to use as hangers. Alright. And you want to have them pretty well drained. You don't want to have a... When I frag these guys, I fragged these a few hours ago, and I've rinsed them in water several times. That piece, that's actually a pretty big piece. Because what they do is they kind of mucus up. And the mucus can actually kind of suffocate the coral if you're not careful. All of these spots, you know, the spots where you can see the calcium carbonate substrate of the coral, they'll actually encrust over. Pocillopora damicornus grows pretty quick if you give it the right conditions. You notice I'm touching the coral pretty aggressively, and it doesn't hurt them at all. That's kind of a misconception of a coral. I've touched several hundred species of corals, and I've never had any of them die or be damaged. Obviously you don't want to abrade the tissue on purpose, but you know, if you hold it gently, it's no problem. I usually try to do the big pieces first, and then if I have room, I'll fill in with the little ones in between. Alright, so before I do that last row, I'm going to go ahead and pour out the rest of this. I usually mark on the container how much of the powder to use. And the mixture is obviously mixed up in advance, but I just don't hydrate it until I'm ready to use it. My goal is actually, I'm on a sailboat now, and I live on the sailboat full time. And my goal is actually to take this technology, this information, and take it to the islands that need this, that are in dire need of protecting their coral reefs because of global warming, and to teach them how to do it. And I'm going to do that free of charge, actually. I'm not going to charge them any money. I'm just going to go show them how to do this. And hopefully they can protect as many reefs as they can. They can even rebuild new reefs where there wasn't a reef before. They can help to reestablish reefs that have been damaged from cyclones or dredging, you know, fishing, all sorts of things. People don't realize how important coral reefs are to the islanders. They really rely on it for their food source and for protection. So it's essential that we keep these corals available. Yeah, so you kind of get an idea how this is shaping up. I do like the checkerboard only because it gives you more room to work. It wastes a little bit of the mix, but, and I've done it where you use every one. You gotta, it's a tight fit. And I use all the pieces, even these really tiny pieces, because you'd be surprised how small they can get and still survive. Alright, that's working pretty good. Now what you don't want to do is you don't want to let it dry out. Corals need to stay a little bit moist, so I'm going to cover this with a container while the mixture